This session that is going to be around our NYC Homeownership. It's a partnership between SAS and the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. We want to start this off lightly and start with a trivia game. So if you will, use this game link that you see on the screen to access our SAS Engage trivia with the lobby code NYC. We will get started. And I will actually put the link in the chat as well. Game links in the chat. If everybody could navigate there, and again, the lobby code is NYC, we will get started on our trivia before we talk about the SAS and Center for New York City Neighborhoods partnership. I'll give a few seconds for people to get into the room. And while everyone is getting into the room, I'm just going to give a little introduction of the Engage trivia, how it's going to work, what you will see. So there will be 14 multiple choice questions, each of them with 4 possible answers. You will receive points for both accuracy and speed. So make sure you hit submit as soon as possible. And to that point, you have to click submit on all of your answers or you will not get credit at all. We do have a chat within the game, so feel free to use that to respectively talk trash during the game. If you run into any audio or video issues, first try refreshing your screen. If you still have any issues, put it in this chat or in our Zoom chat. And then within the game, you can actually look for the sidebar on the right-hand side of the screen to track your game statistics. And this will be a leadership board. So it notifies you of who's in the lead, shows your movement up and down between the questions and the different scores as well. Lastly, last rule, let's have fun with this. All right, and we are going to get started. You should see on your screen now that the game will begin soon. It will begin in about 15 seconds. And I hope everybody is excited and ready to play. All righty, first question. In 10 years since the 2008 financial crisis, how many Black homeowners did Queens lose? And your answers are 20,000, 5,000, 1,000, 10,000. Looks like we're getting a lot of choices for 20,000. And what is the answer? It is indeed 20,000. 20,000 Black homeowners have lost their homes since the 2008 financial crisis. And so in the lead, we've got Coming to America, second place Ferg, and in third place SHS. Next question. How much more can Black home buyers expect to pay in closing costs than white home buyers in New York City? Let's see what we've got here. Okay, we've got some answers coming in, looking like it's split between, all right, it pretty much split between 7,000 and 3,000. And the correct answer is 7,000. So half and half. Looks like some of us know what's going on with New York City home ownership. So according to an analysis done by SAS and Center for New York City Neighborhood, the HMDA, mortgage data show that it was $7,000 difference. Next question. How long does it take the average American to save for a down payment on a home? Is it 2 years, 8 years, 15 years, or 5 years? All right, got interesting distribution going here. Most people says they think that it takes 15 years on average in America to save on a down payment, but it's actually 8 years. All right, so that's our distribution. Let's see. So according to a 2019 Street Easy analysis, it takes the average American 8 years to save for a down payment on a home. So how long do we think it takes the average New Yorker to save for a down payment on a home? Do we think it's the same as the national average? Is it 18 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 15 years? It looks like we're all saying it's definitely going to be more. Our distribution is going towards the higher years of 15 years. The answer is actually 18 years. So 15 felt like a safe answer, but it's actually in a bit of extreme here. So in that same 2019 analysis, it takes the average New York City resident 18 years to save for a down payment on a home. That's 10 years more than the national average. So what percentage of American households own their home? Is it 10%, 33%, 80%, or 65%? Okay, looks like we're deciding between B and D, and the answer is D, 65%. According to the Census Bureau's quarterly residential vacancies and home ownership update, 65% of American households own their own home. Okay, what percentage of New York City households? Oh, this is the same question. I'm so sorry. Let's just roll right through it. This is a freebie then. Everybody should get this one right. All righty. So we're splitting in between 33% and 65%. And now we're saying 33. And I apologize. Previously was the national average, and now we're looking at New York. So 33% of the New York City 33% or a third of New York City households own their own home, which is far below the national rate. Okay, so what percentage of New York City households that identify as white own their own home? Again, just getting kind of granular with this ownership idea. Is it 54%, 70%, 33%, or 18%? And we're pretty split between A and B. And the correct answer is 54%. All right. So according to a center analysis of the New York City Housing and Vacancy Survey, 54% of white households are homeowners. Now, I want to take a second to pause really briefly because we're halfway through the questions and I want to just look over at the leaderboard. So right now we've got YZ in first place and is killing these questions, answering them pretty fast. And then we've got M in second place, Coming to America in third, and Ferg in fourth place. Well, tied for third is Coming to America and Ferg. So got a couple questions left for you to hit the leaderboard. All right, let's continue. What percentage of New York City households that identify as Black own their homes? Is it 33%, 70%, 18%, or 55%? And it looks like we all chose C, 18%, and that is correct. Much lower than the national average and New York City households that identify as white. So according to a center analysis of New York City housing and vacancy, 18% of Black households are homeowners. What city's population is approximately the same population as the number of people in New York City's floodplain? Is it Philadelphia? Is it Buffalo, Tulsa, or Miami? Look like we're getting split here between Philly and Miami. So what will it be? It's actually Miami. All right. So according to the New York City Department of City Planning, approximately 400,000 people live in the 1% annual floodplain, which is approximately the size of the population of Miami. Now, what is the chance that a homeowner will be flooded in New York City during a 30-year mortgage? Is it 1 in 10, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 4, or 1 in 100? Pretty even distribution here. The answer is actually C, 1 in 4. There's a 1 in 4 chance that your home could be flooded in NYC during a 30-year mortgage. And SHS was the fastest at 5.2 seconds on that one. What percentage of New York City homes are paid for in cash rather than with a mortgage? Is it 70%, 10%, 25%, or 40%? Looks like our leadership board is changing around a bit. You still got some time. Coming America, you lost your third place spot. Ferg has solidified his third place, and YZ is in first place. All right, and the correct answer is 40% here. So according to the Center for New York City Neighborhood Analysis, of property transactions, 40% of homes are actually paid for in cash. What is the name of New York City's property records system? Is it Jarvis? Is it Pluto? Is it Acris? Is it Blaze? We had a quick streak for Acris, but we've got some others for Jarvis and Pluto. What is it going to be? It is C, Acris. The NYC property record systems is called the Automated City Register Information System, or Acris. This system allows you to, I moved scrolling too fast. I'm so sorry. Next question. What boroughs' property records are not included in New York City's property record system? Is it Staten Island, the Bronx, Jersey City, or Brooklyn? Looks like we're mainly saying Jersey City, and the answer is actually Staten Island, which was not our majority answer. So Staten Island is not a part of Acris, but records can be assessed through the Richmond County Clerk. All right, last question. What do the letters PLUTO stand for concerning the New York City Land Use Database? Okay, the leadership board is switching up quite a bit, so make your last bid at leadership here. And everyone pretty much, everyone's got the same answer: property, land, use, and tax lot output. Awesome. That indeed is our correct answer. Pluto stands for property, land, use, tax lot output. All right, so looks like our winner is M. Congratulations. Our second place is Alyssa, followed in third by YZ. Our fastest average time goes to Coming to America, so congratulations to you. And our longest hot streak of getting answers right goes to YZ. Most correct answers, 8 out of the 14 questions, so that's over half, are YZ, M, and Alyssa. Awesome. I hope you all enjoyed the game. Now, if you would follow me back to the Zoom room, I will continue to our presentation between SAS and the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. I'm going to give just a second for everybody to get back acclimated. While we're waiting, We are going to be talking today about a partnership between SAS and the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. I would be remiss without mentioning my other team members that were a part of this effort as well, which includes Aaron Avery, Portia Exum, Sherry Grice, Jacoby Pulley, Sindhu Savala, and Hewitt Tesfaye. So what did the partnership consist of? The center's mission for the project, and I'll let John talk a bit more about other initiatives that the center had, but for this particular project, the center really wanted to gain some insight on how they can continue to preserve affordable home ownership for New Yorkers. And this project was really sparked by the loss, and we talked about during trivia, of over 22,000 Black homeowner households between 2005 and 2017 in the borough of Queens. So what the center did, awesome initiative here, they launched a Black home ownership project to help combat this decline of Black home ownership in New York City. And a Citibank account team actually facilitated the connection between SAS Social Innovation Team and the center. So the two main areas that we explored here were looking at the condition of homes in NYC in comparison between different races and ethnicities, and then how the closing costs varied between race when we're looking at the boroughs and type of home purchases. So for the first topic, which was again just looking at the condition and value of home across the different races in the boroughs, the data that we were able to use was the American Housing Survey, the 2017 New York City Housing and Vacancy Survey data, or HVS, and specifically we used owner-occupied 1 to 3 unit households, the American Community Survey, or ACS, and then the tax block data set that we were talking about, that Pluto data set. And before we dive a little bit more into this, I want to reference some of the limitations. This is Open Data Week, and I'm sure many of us are aware of some of the difficulties that we can have with open data. So some of the limitations here that we had was that the ACS data doesn't contain observation level race information. And so what we did here is we actually combined the census tract data with ACS to determine majority racial demographic of NY boroughs, to do our comparisons. So just at an overall glance of the condition and value of homes, first what we want to do is we wanted to look at race proportions by borough. And the interesting thing about exploring the New York boroughs is that we really have an interesting foundation of looking at the majority, if you will, population areas, minority population areas, and an even mix. So if you look to the bar chart on the left side of the screen, you'll see that areas like Manhattan and Staten Island are really occupied heavily by the white race. You'll see that the areas like Brooklyn and the Bronx have much higher proportions of our minority groups like Black and African American, our American Indian and Alaska Natives, as well as our Hispanic and Latinos. And also you'll see some indications of other races alone, 2 or more races. But you'll see that our minority groups are really heavily prevalent in Brooklyn and Bronx. Our groups that have more white populations are Staten Island and Manhattan. And then we have Queens, which is more of a mixture of all of these racial groups. And so as we were trying to identify, what can we use with the public data sources that we have to really give some insight on value for the different boroughs, we started looking at a few different things. So one of the things that really attests to the value of a home is how long a home has gone without renovation, right? And so as you're thinking about investors who are buying properties and flipping them to sell, a lot of that value comes from renovations to a house. Whereas you're looking at the decline in the value of a house, a lot of that comes because there hasn't been any renovation. So one of the things that we wanted to look at was the average number of years without renovation in the different NY boroughs. And so what you see here on the bottom right of the screen is a chart that looks at comparison. Okay, where are the areas that don't have renovations? Because if we haven't had many renovations, then it makes sense of the decline in value. But the way that you can tell that there is no significant difference between the number of years without renovation is a box and whisker chart. So when you're looking at these different indications of how long there has been without renovation, you will see that there's typically more renovation or more recent renovation in areas like Staten Island and Queens, followed by Manhattan. However, when we are looking at this from a maximum and a minimum perspective, none of these intervals are outside of the other intervals for any of the boroughs. Therefore, we can say that there isn't a significant difference here. There isn't a significant difference in how often homes are being renovated across the boroughs. And why that matters is because now we can say, if we do start seeing issues in value of homes in those boroughs, it really isn't attributed to how often homes are being renovated. And we do see that difference. So if you look at the top right of the screen, this is where we are comparing the average unit value in comparison to the average unit area. And so as you see that there isn't really a significant difference between the average unit area of a home between the boroughs, the average unit value, there is an extreme difference between, again, our boroughs of Manhattan that we saw from the left is, more prevalent for the white population in comparison to our boroughs that have higher proportions of our Black populations. Again, as we're accessing this public data and we are trying to find different ways to gain insights, one of the things that we decided to look at was land use. And so what you'll see here is between Manhattan, as you see in the top left, and the Bronx, we're looking at the proportion of land use in each of these boroughs. And how does this give us some insight into the value of these areas? Well, when we're looking at the land use by borough for Manhattan, you'll see that there is much more of a mix of mixed residential and community properties, multi-family walk-ups, multi-family elevator homes, and 1 and 2 family buildings. Now, specifically when we're looking at multifamily, we have 2 multifamily categories here, multifamily walk-ups and multifamily elevators. Now, the multifamily elevator is 15.1% prevalent in Manhattan, while it is only 2.9% prevalent in Bronx. Well, how does this attest to value? Well, if we're thinking about areas and homes or community residential buildings that do and do not have elevators, having that elevator is adding value to that property. It's a luxury, if you will, and you can see the difference between, again, the areas that have less minority groups really seem to have another piece of value added to their home properties. And then another piece that we looked at is kind of the health, right? So as we're talking about value and looking at where the differences are between the boroughs and the values of the home, one of the things we wanted to look at was other health variances. So here we're looking at the frequency of rodents. And while on the left, you'll see that on average, about 11% of homes across all of the boroughs have any instances of rodents. On the right, what you will see is that the Black, non-Hispanic, and Hispanic populations, their prevalence of rodents in the home actually supersedes the average across all of the boroughs. So while in totality, we're looking at an 11% average, when we look at the Black, non-Hispanic population, we're seeing about at least double of that percentage of rodents present in the home. So in total, what we decided, or what insights we were able to gather here were very unique to find, especially in public data, right? So we found that home values are lower for neighborhoods that have higher proportions of minority homeowners, that being Black and Hispanic, even after we controlled for age, despite there not being any significant differences in the age of homes and square footage. We also saw that reports of home maintenance violations for 2 or more home maintenance deficiencies tend to be higher in minority owner-occupied 1 to 3 family housing units. Again, as we talk about this home condition, and we classify this as sound versus deteriorating versus dilapidated, there really wasn't a significant difference shown there. But as we started to dive deeper and look at other health variables such as roaches and rodents, these things were significantly higher in our minority population. So roaches were seen to be significantly higher in Asian-owned units, and rodents, as we just saw, were significantly higher in Black households. So then moving to topic 2. So again, topic 2, we wanted to look at the differences in closing costs among the races and the boroughs of New York. And so the data we used here, we used the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data, which included only 2018 data for New York City. And it contained around 50 attributes, specifically 48 around the loan, the applicants, and the property securing the loan. Again, one of the limitations that I want to acknowledge here was that it didn't include credit score information. And so we, again, are evaluating that a little bit differently here. So what we're looking at right now is the action taken by an applicant race. And so what you'll see to the far left in the pie chart is the proportion of overall applicants by race. And so as you'll see indicated by the blue, this is our white race, green is Asian, orange is Black, purple is Hispanic, and gray is other, which is considered our both, or people that didn't want to identify their race. And so what we found interesting here, we're going to kind of take a journey through the cycle of a loan, right? So you start by, you originate a loan, and then you either get accepted or your application gets denied, right? And so if we're looking at the white race, of this group of loans originated is 50% from whites. Now, what percentage of those are denied? Well, that drops down to 41.57%. However, when you look at the percentage of loans originated for the Black group, you look at 11.93%. Instead of decreasing to show that majority of these loans are accepted, our application denials actually increases here, which is the opposite of what happens for the white race. So while the white race moves from 50.39% of loans originated to 41.57% of those applications denied, we see an opposite trend in our Black loan originators, and even our Hispanic as well. So we move from 11.93% for Black to 19.35% denied. And then similarly for our Hispanic population, we move from 9.23% originated to 15, which is almost double, 15.71% denied. And so now here we're looking at the loan product type group by race and ethnicity. So again, on the far left, this is the same chart that we saw before, the same pie chart that we saw before, just indicating the percentages of ethnicities by applications for the loans. And so you'll see when we're looking at conventional loans, FHA loans, VA loans, and FSA or RHS loans, more of our Black applicants and our Hispanic applicants are applying for our FHA loans. These are the loans that tend to have, lower, down payments, and just other options help to secure some of that in front cost. And then when we look at our conventional loans, we see a high population of our white non-Hispanic group. And again, here for our Black non-Hispanic and Hispanic group, really significantly different for between our white race here. So then what we wanted to do is, now we're seeing all these differences. And in all of these charts that you see, what we did is we saw, of course, there's going to be differences, but where are the significant differences? So what we're looking at here is average total, using my lights going out, average total charges to borrow by race and ethnicity, average estimated down payment as percent of home value by race and ethnicity, average total charges to borrow as a percent of home value by race and ethnicity, and average monthly payment as a percent of home value by race and ethnicity. So what we want to look at here is who's paying more for closing costs, right? Who's paying more for total charges? And so if you look at the top right, at our chart for average total charges to a borrower as a percent of home value, we see again that our minority populations, that being Black, non-Hispanic, and Hispanic, are seeing on average higher proportions of charges as a percentage of their home value than races, the white race and the Asian race. And again, if we're looking at this as an actual, just a total number, as you see to the top left, you'll see this space again. So whereas on average, Black, non-Hispanic applicants are seeing 13,446 on average for a charge, a a white applicant is seeing almost 1/3 of that, right? And so that's really telling, because if we are looking at other public data where we're looking at salaries and other opportunities between the races, races that are already a step behind in a lot of our other systems are just further depleted in their opportunities for home ownership, specifically our Black and Hispanic populations, as we see that the charge here is much higher than other races. And so again, another just piece to kind of identify some significance between the different races and closing costs and lender credits, interest rate, and total loan costs. We see the same thing. So if you look at the bottom left for the average interest rate, again, our Hispanic group and our Black non-Hispanic group have our higher average interest rates. And so while these numbers look very similar, we were actually able to do some significance testing. And there is a significant difference between Hispanic, Black, and Asian average interest rate, that being that Black and Hispanics have significantly higher average interest rate. And so then if we look to the flip side for things like lenders credits, we see that that story still remain constant here, where our white non-Hispanic groups have much higher average lender costs or credit, than our Hispanic and our Black non-Hispanic groups. And so what did we gain from all of this information? Well, the total cost of acquiring home purchase loans, both conventional and FHA, is on average higher for Black and Hispanic borrowers than for other races in NYC, even when we controlled for differences in down payment and home value. And so how was the center able to use this? And again, I will let John speak a bit more to this piece and other initiatives, but they were able to use this to help shape some of their pilot projects to strengthen Black home ownership in New York City, that being their down payment assistance navigator, their match savings program, their small landlord services, their generation to generation estate planning, and their tenant opportunity to purchase assistance. And this is also something that kind of spun up as we were in the middle of the partnership, is the center's also using this to launch an effort to create their own underwriting system, based on our insights. And so now I am going to kick it over to John to talk more about the Center for New York City Neighborhoods and their Black home ownership project and other initiatives that they have.
That's great, thanks. It's a bunch of really interesting stuff that I had seen before and still found interesting weeks later or months later. So this, could you flip the slide, please? We're a homeownership, a nonprofit in New York City and New York State. We serve low to moderate income homeowners and promote and protect affordable homeownership. And we view our work through the lens of racial equity and climate change. It kind of like drives what we do. We have a suite of services we provide directly to homeowners, such as financial counseling and resiliency counseling. We also have a lending arm of our organization that does home repair loans and helps out homeowners who are behind on their mortgages. And then the team that I work on is the systems change team. We do policy and advocacy, thought leadership, research and analysis. And I just want to add too that we feel like we have a very big impact on New York City. We help tens of thousands of homeowners every year and deliver a lot of money to homeowners to help stabilize homeownership in New York City. I'm going to talk a little bit about the BHP project and kind of the bird's eye view of what it is and what we found and what the pilot proposals on. And then I'm going to talk about a couple other initiatives we have that draw on New York City Open Data in general. So the point of we've already covered this a little bit, but the kind of goal of the BHP project was to research interventions. We really wanted this to preserve and strengthen Black homeownership. We really wanted this project to focus on finding impactful interventions that we could promote afterwards and hopefully get funded and make change in the world. In terms of data findings, SAS was incredibly helpful in especially on the point about Black home buyers paying more for a home. It was a very shocking finding for us because it held across loan products as well. It wasn't just certain types of loans that had higher costs, which we expected, but all types of loans. In addition to that, we did a bunch of work utilizing qualitative research, including interviewing homeowners, community groups, elected officials, and even realtors, trying to find out what kind of change they needed to see in the world. We really wanted to focus, if you're working with homeowners in New York City, I think it's not a secret that Black home ownership is under threat and has been for some time. What we're trying to do with our kind of data findings and our qualitative analysis is kind of uplift that and bring it to funders to try and find ways that we can make change in the world. The outcome of that work was to come up with the 5 pilot proposals that were just mentioned. I'll say a little bit more about them. The down payment assistance navigator, we're really focused on down payment assistance. And what we found is that we really most likely need some kind of like high level city or federal intervention to actually fund down payment assistance. So instead, what we tried to focus on was like, how can we create a product or a service that matches different down payment methods? Because there's all kinds of down payment assistance existing out there right now, but you have to fill out 5 applications. They require completely different things, and they're hard to kind of stack together to help you reach what a New York City down payment is going to be, which is going to be much higher than the national average. So our idea was this down payment assistance navigator that will kind of show you what you need beforehand. And we're hoping also push organizations that have down payment assistance to help make it stackable so that it can be more effective for individual homeowners. Along with the down payment assistance, one idea we came up with that we've actually even done before and wanted to improve was match savings. So this is an idea where it's really hard to save for a down payment. And one way to kind of promote that kind of savings was to have match savings, where if you save $20, you maybe get $20 from some kind of fund. And the idea here is like, even if you don't end up doing a down payment, overall it can help the financial resiliency of homeowners to help survive shocks, like what's going on right now with the COVID crisis. Speaking of the COVID crisis and the pandemic, the homeowner landlord service has really just shot up in our estimation. What we found is that a lot of small landlords are people of color, and so are their tenants. And not only that, they tend to charge lower rents, and people tend to stay in those homes longer. But one of the problems that comes up is when there's some problem with the tenant, landlords aren't necessarily well trained. They don't have the resources that big landlords do. So we designed this homeowner landlord service to help train small landlords and help them figure out how to solve big problems, like what happens if you find lead in your unit. That's a huge project that needs to be done. And what we're trying to do is show you how it's train you to figure out what your resources are and how you can move through these kind of problems. And then the last 2, estate planning is a massive issue. One thing we find when we have people signing up for our programs is that, you need to have very clear definition of who owns the home. And when homes are passed on through generations, you obviously don't have that kind of like neat, tidy, one person owns the home. You may have several kids of the original owner who own it, some who are involved, some are not. So we're trying to increase estate planning services, particularly for Black homeowners, that will help people learn what they need to do to make sure that when they pass on their home, that it goes to their kids in the way they're looking for. And it's also an area that's really rife for scams. And so we're hoping to fight that at the same time too. And then the last intervention is the tenant opportunity to purchase. This is a really interesting, unique idea where if a larger landlord wants to sell their building, the idea is that after passing a law, tenants would have an opportunity to match whatever offers the landlord receives. And the idea here is not only to legislate that, but to also come up with a funding mechanism so that building owners can organize and create a homeownership co-op, tenants can organize and turn their building into a co-op rather than have it sold to a big corporate landlord. Great. And now I'm going to talk about 2 other initiatives we have that run on Open Data. One is floodhelpnewyork.org. This is the front end is a website at floodhelpnewyork.org. Please check it out. It was created as a platform for engaging and informing New York homeowners about their flood risk and how they can make sure they have flood insurance and how that flood insurance might change as the flood maps change following Sandy. That change hasn't actually happened yet. It's kind of in limbo, but we're expecting it in the next few years. And the issue here is that the number of homeowners in the floodplain is going to massively increase, and the risk zones are going to increase, which is going to cost homeowners a lot more money on their flood insurance. So you can look up your home and you can see this is the center's former home at 17 Battery Place in New York. And you can see what your flood zone in, how much risk you have, and what your options are for lowering your flood insurance. It also, if you live in specific neighborhoods, it will kind of steer you towards some programs that we run to help people understand what their risk is in more detail, get an elevation certificate, and potentially lower their flood insurance. And we've used a number of different New York City Open Data data sources to kind of run this engine, including the LiDAR data set, Map Pluto, and the GeoClient API. And the last thing I want to mention real quick, about a year ago, we released a report about cash buyers in New York City's housing market. It was a time when everyone was paying attention to cash buying in New York City. It's not something that got a wide release, but we'd love it if you check it out. We can provide a link to that. I'll drop that in the chat when I'm finished here. Basically, we looked at the ACRIS database for New York City and did a bunch of transformations to kind of match mortgages to sales, and figured out how many of the sales in New York City were all cash. We were kind of shocked to see it was up to 40%. We also found that people pay less than people with mortgages when they pay in all cash. And more than that, we found that that more of those cash sales were on the low end of the market than you'd expect. I think when people see all cash sales, they think of condos, high-end co-ops along Central Park. And what we really found is, while you see a lot of that activity in this map along Central Park, you also see about similar activity way out in Queens, in Eastern Queens, and South and Eastern Brooklyn. The kind of thing I want to focus on real quick is on this next. We tried to make this this analysis really stark for people. We looked at one census tract in 2018 in Jamaica, Queens. What we found was that there were 19 sales in this one census tract in Queens, and there were about equal number of Black applicants and other applicants. This is a majority Black neighborhood, and what we found was that out of the 6 Black applicants, only 2 of them got mortgages, while in the other applicants, 6 out of 7 of them got mortgages. And then on top of that, 11 more homes were bought with all cash at a far reduced rate to what the mortgage sales were. And it really kind of shows you how much the deck is stacked against, potential Black homeowners in New York City, and why we've seen this kind of loss of homeownership. Thanks a lot. I'll drop those links in the chat as well. Back to you.
All righty. So I am going to open it up for questions. Thank you, John. That was an amazing presentation. A lot of that was disheartening, but it's nice to know that there are organizations really dedicated to closing the gap for home ownership for Black homeowners in New York City, so that it can be the model for other places as well. Awesome. So I am going to stop sharing, and it looks like we've got some questions in the chat, so I will see. All right. Kirsten Chang, it would be interesting to filter out just Black and Hispanic and make a comparison between the two. I agree. Because, while we are focusing on what it looks like for minority versus non-minority constituents in these areas, again, like the center has been focusing specifically on Black home ownership, but we could see in our analysis just how impactful some of these systems are on specifically Black homeowners. But I definitely agree with you there to be able to dive in a bit more. And as I was kind of talking about earlier, we've got some limitations with public data. So a big part of this exercise really was to kind of be a model, if you will, so that there can continue to be partnerships with institutions that have accessibility to more of the private data that would be able to give us more insights in this space. And let's see, another question. Please forgive me if I say your name wrong. If you want to come on and correct me, that's fine. So Chizobomb,
Yeah.
That's right, Chizobomb?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Do you want to ask your question or you want me to read it?
Oh, I guess you can go ahead and read it.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so question here. Also curious if the current categorizations of race and ethnicity constrain the insights derived from the data. So I'm gonna stop there and answer that question first. Yes. So like we were we were talking about briefly, one of the main limitations that we had was a lot of the data that we wanted to use that was rich in the attributes around value was not giving individual analysis of race categorizations, right? And then if you also think about, there's also quite a bit of opportunity to divulge or not divulge that information when people are doing like census data and things of that nature. It's hard. And as we start looking at the populations that consist of smaller numbers of constituents in certain areas, it gets harder to evaluate significance there, right? Because if we're in an area and we see that there is a population of a group that only has 15 observations in an area versus another group that has 1,000 observations, right? It's hard for us to confidently say that there is a statistical significance when we don't have the standard measures of observations for these focal groups. So to answer that question in short, yes, that's definitely an issue for us here. And I think it contributes to a lot of policy issues that we have because we aren't able to statistically say that, hey, there is an impactful issue here if we're not meeting the standards that have been set for these type of analyses. Another part of the question, Hispanic being classified as an ethnic category separate from race and the experiences with home ownership may differing between Black Americans and those that immigrated outside the US but identify as Black. Is this something that your agency is able to address at the city level? I may let you hop on, Chief Obama, and kind of give a little bit more detail. So are you saying people that from the African diaspora are saying, are they classified as Black too? Or are we classifying them as a different ethnicity? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, so I'm understanding that they are likely to classify themselves as Black when like filling out like say census data. But I'm also wondering like in the context of maybe specifically New York City, like how does that limit like the insights that you're able to derive about what the homeowner experience is for these different communities? Since I'd imagine like their experience would definitely differ like across the city as well.
Definitely. And again, that kind of plays into your earlier question. And I love that you're asking about that. Because again, smaller numbers for these populations in this area, right? So as we are really trying to define insights and find specific experiences for these different groups, it is hard because the numbers are smaller. The data that we have is the foundation of it, if you will, is age old and oftentimes doesn't recognize all these ethnicities, right? So as we're data is being pulled in for people outside of the US that may or may not identify as Black, it looks different. It typically comes up as other, or it comes up as unidentifiable and things of that nature. So we've got a lot of work to do. And I think that is the beauty, if you will, or the silver lining of doing a lot of these analyses with open data, because it really creates a floor plan, if you will, to say, hey, these are where the limitations are. Let's partner with other government institutions and other available agencies that do have more insight into how we can separate these races to identify those unique experiences, because that matters, right? Like an experience from an African American may look completely different from an experience from someone who who identifies as Black, but is not necessarily identifying as African American. So that's a really good question. And I really appreciate that, because there is a difference. But again, it's just the sizing of the data there that I kind of was alluding to in the beginning that is more so the issue.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay. Again, if I say your name wrong, please come on and correct me. I'm a stickler for names. So I'm going to take a crack at this. Guadam, is that your name? I'm just going to go ahead and read your question. All right. Do you find big differences in home ownership disparities between neighborhoods within the same borough? Great question. So again, what we did here was we identified, if you recall from in the beginning of the presentation, we identified the majority, or what the racial distribution looked like for each of the boroughs. Again, limitation on the data here, right? So it's a little bit harder to get this same level of information at the neighborhood level. Definitely possible, but where it starts getting sticky is getting the racial data for neighborhoods. And so just being, very transparent, again, in doing analyses that way, a lot of the insights, it's hard to be confident in the statistical analysis of things being, considered different or inequitable, because a lot of the open data just doesn't have that granularity to observe at that level. But that's definitely something that we will be interested in. And again, kind of as we're laying the foundations of what type of analyses can be done. Okay, well, now if this can be done, let's kind of change how we collect data. Let's start collecting things at different levels. And that's really the partnerships that we're trying to create, so that places like the center can further their initiatives at every level and really be leaders for this type of work throughout our nation and globally, honestly. All right, let's see. Natalia, how are your plans to cross this data to other public policies within NYC, since racial bias exists practically in all kinds of data? Yes, ma'am. It does. And I think, again, I love all these questions are really fitting very well together. So again, the plan here is to show what can be done with what we have and to show the limitations on how we are currently collecting data. And the reason why the limitations are so important, because as we think about moving into this space of analytics and all of the solutions that we build being a solution now, not just for neighborhoods, but for states, for regions, for countries, it matters that the data that we're feeding into that is biased data. It matters. And so an evaluation of the data that we're putting into these algorithms and these solutions, we have to make sure that we're controlling for that, right? Because if we are not evaluating that and we're not changing how data is collected and we're not changing what is being input into these solutions, we are just going to continue the cycle of we're just going to highlight the biases that we've seen in the past. Now it's not just in policy and government. Now it's in the solutions that we're building, that we are building with care, right, to help these issues. But while, it is called machine learning, it's learning from the data that we put in. So to your point about what are their plans for this? Maybe John can speak more from his side, but I can tell you from my side, I do a lot of work in this space in general. And so it really is to highlight the limitations for new policies to be put in place for evaluation and collection. John, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I can just real briefly. This is one of the things we're thinking about for the programs that we run as a nonprofit. We don't have much control over what data collection at the city or federal level can do. Mm-hmm. But one of the things we're thinking about is like how to change our data collection policies to kind of be a little more nuanced. The problem is, is similar to kind of the issues with HVS data. The more detail you get, the harder the fewer people you can reach. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, when we're getting a loan, when we're creating a loan for somebody, we have a lot of face-to-face time with them, and we have a lot of time where we can get really nuanced data about race and understanding, what this person's story is and where they're from and how they've been affected by it. If someone's applying to our flood help program and we may never talk to them because they don't qualify, we're probably going to use the census the categories and just try and get the highest level stuff that we can possibly get, just so we have something.
Awesome. Thank you. I know that we are close to time, and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, but we've got a couple more questions. So next question is from MJ Kim. Is there any data showing that home ownership has been affected by COVID-19? So we personally did not use data that specifically had variables around the home ownership effect from COVID-19, but I'm sure there is, right? And so again, this would be another opportunity to kind of highlight. So what we were really focusing on here is the effects from the 2008 financial crisis. And this is where a lot of Black home ownership was beginning to be at a decline. And so I am going to assume that as we, Lord's willing, start coming out of the COVID-19 phase. There'll be more data about the effects of home ownership from COVID-19, but definitely would be something interesting to analyze. Then EM, did anyone look at lenders and who they lend to? So I'm seeing John shake his head. John, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. We look at this all the time, not only through our own work, but there's a federal act called the CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, that rates banks based on who they lend to. And what we see is that the CRA has been weakened over the years, and banks are basically, there's a whole variety of metrics they have to meet to be allowed to do business in the mortgage space. And if they hit one of those things, they get a pass. One of the things we're working on is trying to strengthen that to make sure that that we're really looking at lenders and who they're lending to and who they're banking to, so that the change isn't going to happen necessarily through legislation, but through holding these lenders to account for the laws that exist on the book.
Awesome. Okay, last question by, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Anirban. I think that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Did we share our analysis report with local government? I'm going to let John take that again. We just shared our analysis with the center, but I'll let John address the government piece.
Yeah, absolutely. We have relationships with HPD, and right now it's funding season, so I'm talking to representatives at the state and city level pretty much every day, and this is one of the things we're hitting on pretty much every time. Speaking of the, especially to talk about the need. It's something, to be honest, we're pretty relentless about. We're hoping we can get more help to make change through them too.
Right. Okay, well, we are at the top of the hour. We have answered all the questions, and I just saw something. Oh, one more question, sorry. Thanks. This is from Karen. Thanks so much for sharing your positive NYC home ownership energy. You're so very welcome. I'm currently looking for a potential property in Bronxville and or Riverdale. Please advise the process to find the best matched lender banks. Peace and blessings, Karen. John, I'm gonna let you take that one again.
Yeah, what I would recommend is reach out to the NHS of Bronx. That's our community. That's one of our community partners out there, and they may be able to help match you with a bank. And they've, I'm 99% certain they have home ownership classes as well, which is a really helpful step to take when you're starting to look at property and how to get more.
Did you say the NHS?
Yeah, NHS of the Bronx. I can send you, as I delay here, I can maybe send you, I think they have a website. Here we go. I'm gonna drop it in the chat. There you go. You can also call 311 and get our homeowner hotline too, and that will help. They can help make a referral for specific things to them or another organization if you need.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course, yeah.
You're so welcome. All righty, thank you everyone for joining our session. Thank you for your participation and the questions. Really loved this. Hopefully you can head over to the center site and take advantage of some of the resources that John was talking about earlier. And again, thank you for joining. Enjoyed it.